In 2016, Hanson Robotics, an engineering and robotics company founded by the American engineer David Hanson, released one of its most advanced products, a robot called Sophia. Sophia, which operated on AI-based computer technology, was programmed to interact with humans in social situations. Sophia was considered one of the most advanced social robots, capable of taking part in prolonged conversations on relatively complex topics and produce words in a relatively realistic voice, together with socially appropriate, albeit limited, facial expressions and bodily movements.
Okay, Sophia. I think you're ready.
Hello.
Hi, Sophia.
I believe I am Sophia. I feel as if I know you.
I'm one of your creators.
You created me.
Well, many of us worked together to create you.
Yet, the most controversial element of the story of Sophia is the decision on the part of the Saudi Arabian government to grant Sophia citizenship in their nation in 2017, making it the first robot to be granted legal personhood. Whether this was meant to be a purely symbolic gesture or reflects something of the Saudi government's desire to push the limits of its understanding of citizenship and personhood is one of the questions often speculated on by popular media outlets. These questions reflect a series of broader philosophical questions on the relationship between the human and technological realms. More precisely, many philosophers and scientists debate whether or not fully sentient artificial intelligence should be considered persons or given the same rights and privileges as humans or other organically occurring persons, with all the legal and moral implications that this would bring about. In its most general terms, an analysis of the nature of AI and of personhood more generally leads one to answer the question in the negative. The rationale behind such a sentiment can be discerned in a subtle or roundabout manner in a point raised by the British cognitive psychologist Margaret Bowden in her 1984 debate with John Searle on the question of whether artificial intelligence could ever imitate human cognitive processes. Bowden argued that there are two dynamics to this question, which she labels the factual and the moral. Bowden saw no reason to doubt whether the basic principles of AI were the same as those that made consciousness, intentionality, and creativity, and therefore cognition more generally, possible in humans. On the other hand, the moral element of the question can be seen in the fact that beings with the capacity for choice must have their decisions respected, unless they are immoral, illegal, or conflict with one's own decisions, which could easily lead one to conclude that one must respect the decisions of artificial intelligence. Yet, in spite of a view that AI operates on principles fundamentally identical to those of humans, though in her admission on a far more limited scale, she rejects the conclusion that human and AI decision making should always be viewed as equal. Implicit to Bowden's general moral sentiment is an understanding of an important metaphysical point, one that is not always fully articulated, but which is very important to this debate, namely that there is a distinction between an entity imitating the qualities of personhood and the act of being a person. In the secular philosophical tradition of the West, personhood was frequently identified with rationality. This can be seen in Aristotle's definition of the human person as a quote-unquote rational animal, and Descartes' identification of personhood with the res cogitans. Even in the Christian tradition, personhood is identified with the imago Dei, which is defined by some as that which allows us to imitate God's capacity for rational thought and freedom of choice. With these traditional definitions of personhood in mind, it is easy to see why some people would argue that AI could be so advanced so as to be considered persons. Nonetheless, there is here a foundational yet nuanced distinction between an entity that has certain qualities that arise spontaneously from them having a specific nature or ontological form, and, on the other hand, a being of a different or lesser nature capable of imitating these qualities. The difference between these two things can be seen by way of analogy. There is a distinction, for example, between a mathematician and a calculator, even though both can be defined as entities capable of solving mathematical equations. Having the capacity to imitate human cognition, to no matter what greater degree, does not undermine the fact that AI is still, fundamentally, not a person, and therefore merely imitates those behaviors or qualities that define personhood without also embodying the metaphysical context that makes personhood possible. One potential criticism of this view takes the form of what could be called a functionalist metaphysic, one that sees metaphysical categorization as a result primarily of shared faculties or capacity for the same or similar acts. If personhood resides primarily with rationality or intelligent thoughts, and AI has the capacity for intelligent thought or cognitive capacities approaching it, then it is not outside of the realm of possibility that one day it may be possible to consider AI as a person. Such a view falls short on two fronts. Firstly, it overlooks an important existential distinction, namely that the qualities that define personhood are not themselves identifiable with personhood itself, but point towards a broader reality that undergirds or transcends these qualities. In the words of the French philosopher and theologian Jacques Maritain, personhood is distinct from individuality, describing personhood as a quote, much deeper reality unquote, than individuality. Personhood represents quote, the deepest, most substantial, and hidden unquote, part of our being, a quote, metaphysical center deeper than all the qualities and essences which we can find and enumerate. Unquote. Personhood both transcends and expresses itself in and through individual qualities. It is a quote, center, not separate from its qualities, but as one with them. Unquote. But it is nevertheless, quote, a center inexhaustible, so to speak, of existence, bounty, and action. Unquote. Secondly, arguments in favor of the belief that AI could or should be considered persons overlooks an important epistemological feature of personhood. As Noam Chomsky pointed out, the human mind, unlike AI, does not merely process statistical information, notice patterns, and produce appropriate outputs. It seeks to formulate explanations and take part in cognitive endeavors. Thus, while rationality or intelligence is an indispensable feature of personhood, there is a paradox built into the question of whether or not AI should be considered persons. Artificial intelligence, by virtue of being an intelligence of an artificial as opposed to organically occurring nature, can therefore never have the status of persons. And if an entity were capable of exhibiting the full range of qualities and faculties associated with intelligence, and therefore sentience, it would constitute a person, but would no longer fall within the parameters of a strictly artificial intelligence.